What is a very interesting or odd psychological phenomena or fact? There are actually blood vessels obstructing light from reaching certain areas in your eye, effectively creating a shadow. Your brain filters this out and essentially fills in the gaps so you don't actually see this spiderweb-like network of black lines. However, you can visualize them by shining a light at a diagonal into your eye, not directly, and gently wiggling it about. This means your brain doesn't have enough time to filter it out and you see this spiderweb-like network of blood vessels. This reminds me of the blind spot trick. So, at the place on your retina where the optic nerve connects, we have no rods or cones. This creates a blind spot. Like in your fun fact, the brain simply fills in this space with whatever is around it. You can find your blind spot by taking a piece of paper, about the size of a note card, draw an X and a dot a couple of inches apart, with the X on the left and the dot on the right. Close your left eye, focus on the X using only your right eye. You might have to move the paper further away from your face, or maybe closer. Do this slowly and the dot should disappear from your periphery vision. You can do this with either eye. Obviously, just make sure you are closing the eye that is in the same side as the dot. We did a version of this with a pencil in a sensation and perception class. If you slowly move the tip of a pencil into the blind spot, the tip will disappear just like the dot in your experiment. However, if you keep moving the pencil past the blind spot so that it comes out the other side, your brain will fill in the gap with the rest of the pencil that you shouldn't be able to see. Lots of other cool experiments can be found on Google too. I learned a variation of this in driver's training in the late 90s. Our teacher taught us to take different routes occasionally to our common destinations because of this. In my early 20s, for the first time I had formed such a pattern in driving to work that on my day off I was driving to the mall and I didn't realize until I pulled into my work parking lot that I went to the wrong place. Placebo effect is the one that is the strangest to me. It's so wild, like fake thing that causes a real effect. What's even more wild is the placebo effect works on animals. And it works on humans when you tell them they're getting a placebo and show them it's a placebo. It's so weird. There's so much extra stuff on top of a basic placebo effect too, like uncomfortable, bigger placebo interventions work better than less comfortable ones. For example, a jab of saline cures pain more than just a sugar pill. There's also some evidence that red sugar pills are more effective than blue at curing pain via placebo. You mentioned red versus blue. This is clearly hardwired in our brain somehow. To expand on this, in multiplayer matches of the game Halo, you have two teams. One is colored red and the other is blue. After analyzing a lot of random matches from matchmaking, red had more victories than blue by a fairly significant margin. Also, each team is randomly shuffled and matched together, so it's not like one is more skilled than each other. It's very weird. The frequency illusion, Bader-Meinhof phenomenon. The frequency illusion is when you start noticing something for the first time and suddenly it appears that this something suddenly crops up everywhere. In reality this is not true. A good example is a, not currently trending, word you heard for the first time. Suddenly you read and hear this word all the time. Reminds me of my driver's license test. It had a question that was something like, if you drive a red car, are you more likely to come across red cars in traffic? I answered false because it made no sense. The right answer was true because of this phenomenon. I still think I was right though. If the question was more likely to come across, then yeah, you're right. But if the question was more likely to notice, then, based on the test taker knowing this phenomenon, the answer was correctly true. Stupid question all around though. I'll never forget in driver's ed that they asked us whether it was, given no choice for alternative circumstances, better to hit the postal worker or the child playing in the street. The correct answer was to hit the kid because it wasn't a government employee. However, many years later I remember this so vividly and fucked up that I've asked others who were in that class and they have the same visceral reaction and still think about how fucked up that was. Jamais vu. Finding something unfamiliar on a subjective level, when we know it is familiar on an objective level. For example, walking around an area you know from childhood, basically the opposite of déjà vu. Yeah, that's called semantic satiation. Semantic satiation is a psychological phenomenon in which repetition causes a word or phrase to temporarily lose meaning for the listener, who then perceives the speech as repeated meaningless sounds. Extended inspection or analysis in place of repetition also produces the same effect. Wikipedia. If you've ever had a bad therapist that your parents sent you to, this can happen. My mom's therapist who became mine did this, and it took me years to realize what happened. I don't even think she did it on purpose. She was just bad at her job and shouldn't have taken me on as a client. After months of going to her, I was convinced I had a bedwetting problem that wasn't actually real, and that I had a masturbation problem that wasn't real. For years I believed this. I wore pull-ups every day because I was worried about bedwetting. In confession, I'd always admit to playing with myself, and was so afraid accidentally touching my vagina for fear of some weird masturbation phobia. I had a customer who knew that her entire family had been replaced by actors. Those had gone through extensive surgery and training to mimic their body language, way of speaking and such, while all memories of the relative they replaced had been transferred to them with a chip in the arm. She told me she was a nurse and had witnessed this in other cases. It's really crazy. This actor lives in the house of your relative, looks like him, speaks like him, knows everything that happened 20 years ago, but this isn't your relative. She was 100% convinced of this, not the smallest doubt. Her main concern was what happened to her real family. Only years later I learned this is called Capgras delusion. I hope she got help, and that she could reunite with her family. Don't know if it's connected, but when I was a kid, I remember seeing my older brother get up in the middle of the night and leave the room only for me to spot him still sleeping in his bed. I wondered where my real brother went and if someone had replaced him somehow, and later came back to swap again. Growing up, I realized, of course, that weird things happen at night, like being half asleep and such, but I still randomly think about that night wondering what if. I mostly attribute it to watching The Last Starfighter and having an overactive imagination as a kid. Fact 1. It's common for victims of violent crimes to forget key details, even if they saw everything, because their brain is focusing more on how to survive than how to identify the perp. It's rare for prosecutors to have a victim who remembers everything about the perp or the place, which makes the trial difficult because we often assume that victims will remember all the key details. In fact, they're more likely to remember minor details like smells and sounds. Fact 2. If you keep the first and last letter in every word in the same spot but rearrange the middle letters, your brain can automatically figure out the words. In the world of restaurants, this is called the walk-in of forgetfulness, where you go to the walk-in fridge for something you need, open the door and immediately forget why you went to the walk-in, so you return to your station and 5 minutes later remember what you needed, so you go to the walk-in to get it. Depending how baked you are at work, this cycle can repeat itself a few times pretty easily. Alright, time to get started researching this project. It's only noon. I have all day. Let's go. Wow, that's a really nice squirrel. How do they climb so fast? Wonder what their claws look like. Dang, I know so much about squirrel claws after that Google search. It's only 1 o'clock. I should probably take the trash out and do some dishes. A dip in the pool first sounds nice though. Okay, let's kill 2 birds with 1 stone and BBQ while I'm out here. It's only 2 o'clock now and I've eaten and, oh shit, gotta get the trash. Let's shower off first though. Shit, I should take out the trash before I shower. I could walk the dog too. Don't want to get sweaty before oh shit, let's get started on that project. If I start for like 5 minutes it will be easier to come back to. Oh hey, a video about ferrets now. Why are they illegal to have? Let's find that out. It's only 2:30. Balls. I need to grocery shop but I probably smell like chlorine. Fuck it. I'll play some video games for like an hour. I probably deserve that. Confronting someone with information that is at odds with what their brain is used to stimulates the amygdala in the same way a physical attack does. So telling some old person that what they think the world is like is essentially wrong can be compared to a slap in the face. This can be small things as well. I tried to explain to my father once that people are making money off of YouTube as content creators and that idea was so outlandish to him that he got angry and loud. My girlfriend at the time was really confused and scared afterwards. We ran into this while taking care of my grandmother once dementia had set in. She kept asking where various family members were. Originally my mother would remind her that person had been dead X years. My grandmother would get angry she wasn't told prior and would grieve all over again. I was in high school and after watching it enough times I would say they were over on whatever street the cemetery they were buried in was on. She'd handle it better. She knew where they were, not why they were there, was able to get other family members to follow suit. Daily visits became less stressful for everyone involved. Before my dad succumbed to Alzheimer's, he'd talk about his parents a lot. If we were taking him somewhere, he'd say wait I need to tell mom where I am going and I'd tell him I already did and said to have a nice time. That always worked and was way better than trying to explain they were gone. Also fuck Alzheimer's. My family was encouraged to keep up the delusions when my grandma had Alzheimer's. She'd ask when her dad, who had been dead for 60 years, was coming to pick her up, and we would tell her he got busy on the farm and would be there soon. It was so upsetting to tell her the truth that it was more kind to lie and keep her in a happy mental state. When asking for something big, lead up to it by asking for something inconsequential at first, so the person is likely to say yes, followed by slightly larger requests. Once a person has said yes, they feel obligated to keep saying yes. Salespeople do this a lot. If you want something small, start by asking for something ridiculous, so by comparison, the small thing seems trivial. Salespeople do this a lot, too. Also, people are more inclined to let you do something if you give a reason. The interesting part is that it doesn't really matter what the reason is. For example, asking to cut in front of someone at the checkout. If you ask, "Do you mind if I cut in front of you? I just need to buy these things," will be more effective than just saying, "Do you mind if I cut in front of you?" Even though the reason is irrelevant, everyone is in line because they need to buy things. Brains are weird. For more social psychology facts, subscribe below. Just kidding. Buy a textbook, I'm not a bot. The word is typoglycemia. The typical paragraph included to show this is Akdrnigtuershierjetkmabrigda I nerve tc, idiosentern want or edgerthiltiers in a radar. The olnia permutantihan is tat the frist and losataltier be at the regitpkli. The reset can be a totalmsis and you can side or it wouth it porbem. Tis is bgusi e the huam idios not redervielt strabiasalif, but the rod is low. All our memories have, while not a time stamp, a vague chronological order. Without having a date or time to include in the memory, we still know that something happened in approximate distance in the past, or just a moment ago, or in a particular order. The problem is, very occasionally a memory is missing that chronology and so we have no idea when it happened. This is the most likely and common reason for déjà vu. We see something and it immediately falls into a vague "it happened at some point" timeline. Because we only know it happened sometime in the past, we think that it is a separate event from the one that is currently happening, so we think it has happened twice. It's pretty common to my knowledge, but them not being in third person isn't proof that it wasn't traumatic, if that makes sense. The third-person view appears to be tied and somehow distorting it as not my memory to try and cope. There's also fun complicating stuff like not having visuals with memories, them ending abruptly or only experiencing body memories and sensations as well. The brain is incredibly good at filling in the gaps. I mean, the reason optical illusions work is that we're constantly losing information between our eyes and brain due to lack of bandwidth, and our brain fills in what makes sense. It may well be that there's gaps in the memories due to that trauma, and your brain has filled the spaces with what you would expect to be there, because you know you were there. It adds you to the memory but has no version of you from that memory, so puts the current you in. It's not actually you from then because you're the wrong age. So part of your brain still sees that addition as another person. The third-person view could be a way to parse this dissonance. No way to know if that's true. I'm an interested amateur, so I've been to several talks on the brain and psychology as part of various science events. But I'm applying layman assumptions to something I'm not qualified to guarantee any accuracy on. Tolerance, value systems, and association. Your brain has a tendency to adjust to certain things. People call this getting used to it or getting comfortable. The reality is desensitization. A good chunk of the time people will think something is normal just because of frequent experience or association with something they are familiar with. In reality, it's not that common and can be very wrong. It's actually used to lull people into complacency by easing them into scenario by habit or routine, rather than slow progression. Because the brain uses association for memory or reason, people have a tendency to accommodate things they are familiar with, so the familiarity is used to cause later association. This chain can continue, even though the entire chain of synaptic connects can all be false and take forever to untangle and break down. It's what people mean by caught in someone's web. The neural network of the brain being manipulated in this way is the reason for a lot of disorders and their difficulty in recovery, especially due to bias or the Pygmalion effect. Johari's window is cool too, but I like the dynamic of decision-making between acting and thinking too. Edit, typos. Tachypsychia. Essentially, under situations of extreme stress, your mind starts processing information at such a high rate of speed that time seems to slow down in your perception. Victims of car crashes experience it. I experienced it during my first firefight in Afghanistan. It was like the entire world was slow motion. Famously, you saw Tom Hanks' character Captain Miller in Saving Private Ryan experience it during the Normandy landing sequence. I've experienced this when I was in high school. I was driving with some friends of mine during the winter months, and our car slid into a tree. Right before we hit the tree, I distinctly remember time seeming to slow down as we plowed through the tree. It was a small tree. The whole thing took about 3 seconds, but it felt like 30 seconds to me. I remember the moment right before we hit the tree, and the moment right after when I was running away. The friend wasn't supposed to be driving people yet because we were only 16. I didn't realize this was an actual thing. I've got a super lame example of this. I was running down a steep hill. About halfway down I realized I did not have control anymore. Gravity was accelerating me and I wasn't sure I could move my feet fast enough to keep up. Everything slowed down and I was trying to decide if I should dive and try to control my fall. I looked to the left and it was clear. I looked to the right and there was a grate I would hit. I started thinking about how to fall to best protect myself when I reached the bottom and stopped safely. It was probably about 4 seconds from the first oh shit until I was at the bottom, but I put a lot of thought into what to do in that 4 seconds. This happened to me a lot when I would do acid. The one time I remember best is my friend had a bottle of water and he flung some at me and I saw all the individual droplets slowly coming towards me, pulsating and rotating. And it was like he knew what would happen because he said that was really cool, right? Yes it was. Alternately, they can completely forget that the person died. My great-grandparents were married almost 70 years. And when she died he was convinced she was just in the hospital. Over the next 3-4 months we had to tell him usually at least once a day that she was dead, and it broke his heart every time. Probably the worst thing I've ever had to experience.